Hello everybody, in this lesson we're going to be talking all about semantic layers, what they are, how they work, and what they do for your team, as well as some of the pros and cons of even having a semantic layer. So let's talk a little bit about what a semantic layer is. It is basically a layer between your raw data and your end user, which could be you, or it could be a client or some type of consumer. Now, when your client or you wants to use AI, maybe you're just asking a natural language question, hey, what does our revenue look like this month? You aren't going to be hitting directly off of your raw data. What you're going to be doing is you're going to be sending that query or that prompt to your semantic layer, which is going to translate it and then is going to go to your raw data, get the correct information, and then give it back to you. It's basically an AI translation layer, right? It's translating what you're saying in English to actual queries or code to go and get the data that you need and return it properly. Now, what does this layer actually look like? In a lot of databases or on a lot of different systems, they could just be a YAML file, and it's gonna define your business metrics, it's gonna define different dimensions, and it could even define things like joins between your tables. So if I'm working in a database and I see a column that says amount and it's in some transactions table, that may be the final amount that a customer paid. It could be the amount or the quantity of something that someone bought, which are two totally different things. And what you can do in this semantic layer is you can define exactly what that column is or what it means. If you use AI to hit directly off that raw data, it may not fully understand the context of what that amount column actually is. But when you define it and you have that layer, once you start querying that data, you're gonna get the same answer and everyone's gonna be on the same page about exactly what that is. Now, like I mentioned, in the age that we're currently in with AI being integrated into basically everything, it's pretty important to have these semantic layers, dare I say, needed for most companies. Now, there are pros and there are cons to using semantic layers or to having them. And so let me talk about the pros first, which we've talked about a few of them, and I'm gonna focus on the cons next. The first pro is that you have that single source of truth. You've defined your metrics, you've defined all of these things so that whenever somebody's asking questions on the data, you're all gonna get the same thing. So if you ask how many sales do we make this quarter, it's gonna understand what that is if you've defined it. Because quarters can be different. Are you talking about a financial quarter? Are you talking about a calendar quarter? If you have this semantic layer, it's going to be defined. And so you won't have two different numbers, whether it's looking at a financial or a calendar quarter. The next thing is that semantic layers really help with reproducibility, because that's one of the biggest issues with using AI in any type of database is reproducibility. The next thing is that it's gonna make self-service easier. It's not going to perfect it, but it's gonna make self-service easier. The issue has always been with self-service is that there's always things breaking. There's always things that are changing. And so people going and getting data themselves has always been an issue. I have seen within different organizations that I've been working with is that it has actually helped with self-service, although it has increased requests as well for more in-depth kind of digging into data when certain things don't look exactly right. And so a lot of those low-level queries, a lot of those low-level questions that would typically go to like a business analyst, a data analyst, or a data scientist for some of these requests, those are kind of being taken care of at some level, but the more difficult questions are needing a lot more work to kind of dig into these things to make sure they're really accurate. But now let's look at the cons, and there are cons to using semantic layers. The first big con is that you have to maintain these semantic layers a lot. And as dimensions change, as metrics change, as a lot of things change, which they do in business, you have to keep this updated, otherwise it goes out of date very quickly. Now, along those same lines, this was a pro before, how you can update one semantic layer and you're good to go. But it depends on how your data does things. You may have data all over the place with all different departments, and you're gonna have to rebuild these out. And you may have to change these dimensions. You may have to change these metrics depending on the department or depending on who you're working with. Again, that's just a lot of maintenance and a lot of things that you're gonna have to be thinking about for that end user. The last con is just getting buy-in from everybody, right? This is kind of like a political thing, right? You're working with other departments, you're working with other people within your company, and you have to get buy-in for these things. And that's a very real issue. And so everyone agreeing on definitions and metrics and agreeing that we even need semantic layers at certain levels of our data, that requires buy-in. And that's not always the easiest thing to get. In fact, I would say that might be one of the harder things, because once you get it approved, sure, you have somebody to maintain it, and then that's a con. But even just getting it implemented, actually creating it and everyone agreeing together is going to be one of the biggest challenges that you face trying to implement something like this. The smaller your organization, the easier it's going to be, but as you get into larger companies and as you start working with different departments and you guys are all kind of sharing and using similar data, that's where it gets really, really tricky. In my opinion, semantic layers aren't really optional if you're gonna be using AI, especially within like a database, or you're using it for visualization, or you're trying to implement agentic AI inside of your code base, or inside of your database, or inside of your workflow, whatever it is. You have to have these semantic layers. So I don't think it's optional, but it doesn't mean it's gonna be super easy to get everybody on board. There are a lot of politics within business, and you're gonna see that when you start trying to implement AI and implement these semantic layers within your organization. These are things that are just gonna pop up, and you're gonna have to be aware of them, and you're gonna have to have some type of logic for why you're doing it certain ways. With that being said, I hope that that was helpful. I hope you understand semantic layers a little bit more. And if you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.